Hey, it's working.
Can you wait, stand. I wanted to check something. I think so. Yeah, can you do a test? Yeah, we need a test. Are you also holding your phone here?
The Alton,
Set. On. Git. Set.
1 second,
It's
just one
low.
second.
Set.
I think so. Yeah, can you do a test?
Okay,
Oh, it's a bit delayed.
but you can be heard really. So I don't know. Is it using the computer's microphone as well?
Yeah, it's using that right now.
Test. Norman. Test. by a presentation. Actually, Steve Gibson is giving this one. Cheryl Fernandez, unfortunately, was not able to join us. And then we'll wrap up with Dan Asher from IRE giving us a presentation on OEM versus non-OEM. I'd like to thank the Craig International Group for sponsoring this meeting, and they're also sponsoring the drinks afterwards. So a big thank you to the Craig International for supporting us, for being a strong supporter of the IADC and the SAPC, and certainly for sponsoring this meeting. One of the things I want to make sure everybody knows is we've never done this before, but many of you may recall the second quarter meeting, we did it online, and that was the first time we had ever done an online meeting. The last meeting we had right in this same room, and we had it live. We felt like that went really well. It was great to see the attendance, similar to what we have today. This week, or this meeting, we've decided to do both. So just for everybody's information, we're great to have the support of Norman Lech from Payson over here, who's running the camera, and this meeting is available live stream. You can see it remotely. It will also be recorded, and it will be available on the IADC website after this meeting is over. So thank you very much, Norman, for helping us to pull this together. We think it's really important that everybody who is a member of the IADC has the opportunity to participate in this meeting. And we also very much respect those people who are a little bit uncomfortable with being outside and want to try to reduce the spread of coronavirus by taking the safe choice and looking at online. The usual house calls or housekeeping issues. No fire drills or alarms are planned for today that I'm aware of. So in the event that there is a fire alarm, we can go out through these doors here, take a left, go out onto the patio. If you go down the stairs, the muster point is out to the parking lot. Make sure, if you haven't already, when you come into the meeting, make sure to sign in. We do want to see who's attending the meeting and make sure that we keep an accurate record and a head count. Return your badge after the meeting. We do recycle these. So when you finish, please leave your badge on the table by the point where you leave. We do have speaker slots and sponsorship slots available for the meeting in February. So if anybody is interested in giving a presentation or anybody is interested in sponsoring the meeting, please do. You can contact Gary Castell at the email address up on the screen behind me. And again, thank you to the Craig Group for putting this meeting on. A little bit about the chapter membership. As we all know, the chapter membership has grown significantly over the past several years. In 2020, or this year, we have 108 paid memberships. We rolled out the new membership renewals in September, and so far we have actually 62 members now. I think one signed up today for the IADC going into 2021. I believe there's a list of the 2021 memberships sitting on your table. You know, by being a member of the IADC, you have access to these meetings. You have the ability to join any of the various work groups that we have. And we really appreciate the support of everybody being in the IADC. And please, if you're coming to these meetings as a guest or you're coming in as a non-IADC member, you know, we certainly don't have anybody at the front to stop you from doing that. And we really encourage everybody to have the opportunity to come in and see a meeting, see what we're all about. But please, if you are going to participate in the IADC activities, please become a member of the IADC as well. A little bit of an update on the HR work group. Derek here. The HR work group is one of the half dozen work groups that we have. This is just a quick overview of what's happening in the HR work group. It has been pretty quiet because of the COVID, and we're doing some reorganizing. One of the things I do want to reinforce is just to kind of give everybody a quick overview of the groups that we do have. We have an HR group, we have an HSE group, we have a contracts group, we have our charity group that drills the water wells in Africa. We have the golf group, or the golf tournament group, and there's one more that I'm missing. Supply chain, Steve. Thank you very much. Again, if you have an interest in any one of these particular disciplines, please let us know. This is your chapter. This is not the officers chapter. This is all about the membership of the IADC. So if you care to be involved in those activities, please just let one of us know. Sean McLaughlin, will come and give us an update on the golf tournament, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here on behalf of the Golf Committee, just to give you a small update about everything's going on. Right now, we're still planning to go ahead in March 24th and 25th, 2021. We've been in a lot of discussions with Emirates Golf Club on how to ensure that we can go ahead with this. One of them ideas was about segregating the gala dinner into groups of 200, just to ensure we reduce all the contact around. I know it's not ideal, but we need to look at ways of moving forward with the event, just in case we can't have 1,000 people on one plate. Right now, we still have 104 teams that were confirmed for last year, so they automatically get next year. We're hoping to get a few more teams in, so if you know anyone interested, please let us know, or give them my contact details. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. I would now like to give the floor to Hisham. Hisham, as you can see, is the Vice President of the Eastern Hemisphere for the IADC. And Hisham, maybe you can just give us an update on general regional activities. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to start by thanking Peter for the wonderful 3 years that he has spent with us on the IADC SAPC chapter team. And thanks a lot for all the efforts, for all the time. I know that you were thinking about stepping down last year, as you anticipated that things are going to get busy with you, and you decided to go on for 1 more year. So we thank you for that, and good luck for the incoming chapter chairman. My name is Hisham Zibian, and I'm the Vice President for the Eastern Hemisphere for IADC, based here in the UAE. I'm just going to give my usual regional update. Just some of the past IADC events regionally that took place between the last chapter meeting and today. We've had a day 2 of the contract seminar on the 22nd of September. We also had the Australasia annual general meeting. The NAGC chapter meeting had their first virtual meeting last month as well. The International Onshore Advisory Panel, the Offshore Advisory Panel as well. IADC headquarters participated at ADIPEC as a media partner. This is a partnership that we have with ADIPEC for a very long time. And the Nigeria chapter annual general meeting is going to be starting in exactly 10 minutes. It's going to be also virtual. Regarding the future IADC meetings that are going to take place between now and up until the first quarter of 2021, we have the Southeast Asia chapter annual general meeting. This is going to be also virtual next week. And the following 3 conferences, as you know, all of our conferences had to be, we had to go virtual this year and also in Q1 next year. So if any of these are of interest, please log into our website and you can find more information about the World Drilling Conference. It was supposed to happen in Paris, as you can see. It's going to be on the 8th and the 9th of December. It will be virtual. We have a very interesting program for all of the upcoming conferences we have. Of course, the IADC Drilling Middle East Conference that was supposed to take place also in Oman, Muscat this year, but we also had to go virtual. And finally, which is the Caspian Drilling Conference, also on the 23rd and the 24th of February, 2021. This is a conference that happens every 2 years, so it alternates between the Caspian and the Africa Drilling Conference. And finally, just a small update about the lobbying efforts that we have been involved in recently. So internationally, of course, not only in this region. We have been involved in the Indonesian cabotage law. I don't know if any, or I think some of you are familiar with this issue. There has been an exemption. The exemption that was agreed on expires on December 31st, 2020, and the IADC is being involved and trying to get an extension on this exemption. There is also the Australia's industrial manslaughter law, which is also a law that has been very strict on all the companies operating in Australia. Actually, this law has not been implemented in all of the states. It has only been implemented in Queensland and Victoria until now, but there is a bill currently in West Australia's Parliament discussing this law, and New South Wales doesn't have this law implemented. And just around 3 weeks ago, IADC has also been involved in the Saudi Arabia's flagging of mobile offshore drilling units operating in Saudi waters. We have just formed a work group from all of the offshore drilling contractors operating in Saudi Arabia. Yesterday, the work group had its first meeting, and we're planning to meet again next week or the week after, depending on the updates that we get out of Saudi. So if you are interested to know more about these work groups and the efforts that we're being involved in, please do not hesitate to contact me. That's all from my side, and thanks a lot for attending.
Great. Slip my mask off for just a minute here. The next in line is Steve. Recognize it may be a little remorse of me not during the introduction, which I normally do. Let me just, for those of you who have not been to a lot of the meetings, let me introduce to you those who are actively involved in the IADC. You know, myself, Peter Cunyon, I'm the chairman of the IADC. Gareth Burrows, if you would stand up. Gareth is the vice chairman of the IADC SAPC chapter. Mike Simpson is the secretary. William Devoto is the treasurer. Olga Labai is in charge of our contracts work group. Steve Gibson, who will be beginning up here shortly, looks after the supply chain. And of course, Sean, you were up here giving a presentation earlier, looks after the golf group. Derek Massey is not here, but Derek looks after the human resources group. And Steve Taylor was unable to make it, and Steve looks after our charity group. So with no further introduction, Steve, the floor is yours.
1, 2. Oh, yeah, it works. Thank you, Peter. Okay, hello, everyone. Me again. You'll be sick of the sight of me by the end of the day because I'm talking a bit later on as well. But just to give you a bit of an update on the supply chain group, we have established the group now. We've got 17 members in the group. We have met virtually twice, I think, and once in person, actually, face to face at the IADC offices. We had a small group gathering. We split the team into 2 focused areas. We have purchasing, which is being led by Alistair. Alistair, do you want to stand up and say hello? Alistair Robertson from Aramac. And Alan Green of Petrasco is doing the logistics team. We have got our own email address now. So if anybody would like to reach out to us, please do through this email address here, supply chain email address. We're going to be sending a letter out next week. One of the key things we realized we need better connectivity with purchasing and procurement professionals within the drilling contractors themselves. So we're going to be sending a letter out, Gary, next week, I think, to try and encourage. We would like to identify purchasing, logistics, people within these companies and get their names on a piece of paper and start engaging and getting to the root of some of the supply chain issues. You might not be able to read this, but I think you have the slides after. This is the team. So we've got a fair mix of people. Alistair, as I said, we have some people from my team at Craig. We have Carlos, Sony, Jason. So it's a fair mix. It's a good mix. We're always looking for more people. So if anyone wants to join the team, let me know. And I think that's about it for supply chain. I'll speak to you later on. Thank you.
Okay, and of course I didn't introduce, isn't it always the case in your company, the people that actually do the work don't get any recognition? It was very remorse of me to leave Gary Castell out of the list of people that are members of the IADC SAPC. He actually is the hardest working one in the group. He's basically our unofficial general manager, who's the one that makes all of the arrangements, organizes all these meetings, and basically herds cats. So thank you very much. I should have introduced you before. And on that note, I guess maybe it's time just to have a new chapter election.
Good afternoon. I think most people know me, and I think people are waiting to find out who I was working for. So yeah, I am now the BD manager for the Sparrows Group, looking after new markets. So anybody needs anything Sparrows, I'm your man. Business cards are all across there. Come and see me. So the chapter elections, we hold these every year. Sometimes we have people who stay on, sometimes we have people who move on and such like. We've got a mix of that this afternoon. So what we'll need to do is to go through the various different positions, get it all documented as to who's doing what and such like. For each position, I will need from a member, I know there's a mix of persons in the room who are members and non-members, so it's only members who can vote. We'll need somebody to agree and nominate, and then we'll need somebody to second, and then that will allow us to put that person into the position. We'll record that and we'll put it all in the minutes, which again we put available on the website and such like. So the first position that we have is that of treasurer. Historically, that's been done by SAFR. SAFR's been doing that for as long as I can remember within the chapter. That's headed up by William and his team. You've been taking on this role for how long, William? For about 6 years. I spend a lot of time talking to Vicky and Francis, and they do a great job. No one else has come in to say, I would like to get my hands on the money, thankfully. So at this stage, William is unopposed. So can we have someone to nominate William to remain as treasurer, please? I need a name and a company. Dan Asher at IRE will nominate, and the second will be Sean McLaughlin of Worldwide Power. So that's, at least we know the money's safe for another year, yeah? The next position is very similar. This is for Mike Simpson of CANSCO. CANSCO have carried out the secretarial duties of the chapter for a great number of years. Mike's been acting as secretary for 9-10 years now, Mike, something along these lines. So again, no one has jumped in to say they would like to take on the paperwork. So Mike remains unopposed. So we need someone to nominate Mike to remain in that position. Again, I can get at the back there what we've got. Manoj from KCA is the nominee, and to second, we've got Norman Lentz from Passon. So Manoj is the nominee, and Norman from Passon. So then we've got Gareth Burrows, formerly of Valorous, and you may remember that Gareth was elected as Vice Chairman last year. We had a ballot between yourself and Blake Denton, I think it was, of Noble. So Gareth came on, very active in the role of Vice Chair. However, within the chapter bylaws, it does state that the Chairman's position and the Vice Chair position should come from an employee of a drilling contractor. And during the year, Gareth left his employment with Valorous and has taken on new employment with one of Sparrow's competitors, which is Orig. That was quite good, wasn't it? So Gareth is going to have to stand down. So he's standing down, and that's the reason why he's standing down. Gareth's going to remain within the IADC fold, and he's actually going to take on some of the responsibilities that I was doing, and he's going to take on looking after the work groups and being the coordinator for the work groups. So well done, Gareth, for your time in the past year as Vice Chair. So with a volunteer to take on the Vice Chair position. We couldn't find one. So Peter eventually press-ganged Doug McEwen. So Doug McEwen from Boyle Drilling, where are you, Doug? Up at the back there. So Doug of Boyle Drilling has volunteered to take on the Vice Chair position. So again, if I can have a nominee for Doug, please. There we go, Dennis Thompson from NOV as nominee, and to second, we've got Alistair from Aramark. Yep, perfect. So congratulations to Doug, well done. You'll enjoy that new role. And that then means that Peter, who has been with us for 3 years as chairman, been a great chairman as far as I'm concerned, helped create a fantastic team, the work we can all see all around us with the work groups. So Northern Offshore obviously taking up more of your time. So after 3 years, Peter Cunnion is standing down as chairman. So thank you very much for all your time and effort. So as a new chairman, we have one volunteer, which is Wayne Bauer. Where are you, Wayne? So Wayne Bauer of Vantage Drilling has volunteered to take on the role. Wayne has been active within the chapter. He's chaired and hosted committees at IADC conferences, and currently actually takes a lead role at this particular point within the HSE work group, which is again one of our very active work groups. So great to have Wayne coming on board to take on the role of chapter, as long as you guys vote for him. So we need somebody to nominate Wayne. Who's at the back? I can't recognise it. Oh yeah, Andrew Stratton of IRE. Sorry, Andrew, as a nominee and a seconder. And we've got. There we go, Andrew from Sparrows. And that concludes the board elections. Thank you very much for your time. Mike.
Thank you. Okay, I'm here to this point in the agenda, the SAPC acknowledgements, but first of all, what is the SAPC? A lot of new faces here might not know what SAPC is. SAPC, the Southern Arabian Peninsula chapter, is a product of three things. IADC, the International Association of Drilling Contractors, and it's their objective to connect the whole drilling community worldwide. It's a product of member companies, us, and a product of volunteers, individuals, pretty dedicated individuals that have created this particular event today. Now, SAPC is an organized structure of volunteers. It's a structure of officers, and those officers actually have legal responsibilities now because we're registered with the Dubai Association. It consists of committees, the golf and the charity committees, and it's an organization of work groups, which we've just heard about a few moments ago. Our purpose is to connect locally the drilling community, us. We have a mantra: meet, share, and make a difference. We organize events, fun events like the golf, and we organize these kind of meetings to share knowledge and information in the industry. And we have work groups where we get together in specific groups to share information around common industry challenges. Now, the SAPC has been around for, I'm guessing, before I arrived here in 2004, but it's been since 1998. I think that as far back as we can research, William, yeah, 1998. So SAPC has been here a while. However, in 2013, it underwent a reboot. I arrived into Dubai 2004. I came from Azerbaijan. I was the IADC chapter chairman in the Caspian. So I came in 2004 here, and I joined the chapter here. So I've kind of seen this chapter, SAPC, grow from what it was in 2004 into what it is today. There's no comparison. 2013, we underwent a huge transformation, much more modern communications. We had email, all the different social media accounts. And since 2013, because of some really supportive individuals and their companies, their organizations, this chapter has grown from strength to strength to strength, to the point that SAPC has become pretty much the model for IADC chapters around the world. So for me, having seen the pre-SAPC and now I see what it is today, just quite a transformation. I'm really privileged to be able to stand here and acknowledge two individuals who have been a big part of the transformation, a big part of the success of our chapter. So I want to recognize two of our people, the SAPC people. First of all, I want to recognize Manoj. Sorry, let me get Manoj Raghavan. He was one of the individuals back in 2013. Chapter chairman at that time was Thorold Martin, myself and Thorold, Manoj, William, you joined roughly at the same time. And we were part of the let's start to reshape the chapter into something special. And Manoj was an officer, vice chairman at that time, and he kept that even before that time. And he kept, he stayed on as officer until about 2018, roughly. And he was a big part of the transformation, specifically making sure, helping us to get registered with the DAC, because an organization like this has to have a legal status now. We have to be organized, we have to follow the laws for various reasons. So Manoj's input in terms of helping the company get registered, established, running the chapter, And also he ran a number of work groups, including local content, HR work groups back then. So he's been extremely active in our SAPC community for many years. So I would like to invite Manoj up here, please, to, on behalf of the chapter, we would like to present him with a small gift. The reason we're doing it now is because Manoj is about to retire, or maybe you have retired. Right. So, and I've known Manoj a long time, and he doesn't look one day older. One or two grey hairs. Apparently, he's off to do his black belt in yoga, and he's keeping himself slim and trim. So, Manoj, on behalf of the chapter, I am absolutely privileged, delighted to present to you a small gift. Small gift. You can thank Gary for that. On behalf of the chapter, thank you so much for your contributions. Did you want to say anything?
I'll say a few words.
Do you want one of you?
Yeah.
For that one. Okay.
So, as Mike mentioned, I recall that when we first met, it was at the Emirates Golf Club. And I was just recently cleaning up my desk because I'm retiring on 31st of December. So I had some of those minutes, and it was 11 members who had attended the meeting in those days. So it was quite a small, and like Mike mentioned, one of the things that really worried us at that time was we ran a golf tournament, which was very famous at that time. The chapter was more known for the golf tournament, but it was not a registered legal entity. And we were all office bearers of those entities. So that was one of our first primary goals at that time, to get that done. And that was the rules in Dubai required quite a bit of extensive research and work, and a lot of guys supported us in that regard. And a lot of people worked behind the scenes and facilitated that. So that was a major milestone for us. And then I've seen how the chapter has grown, and Peter has done a great job over the last 3 years. It's been really wonderful to see so many members now. And like we heard, last was 130 people who were attending it live today. So that's a real achievement for the whole chapter. And thank you for all the office members for keeping it going and growing it from strength to strength every year. Thanks, everybody.
And there's one other bag of goodies. I'm not quite sure. It's a Gary Castell surprise, I believe.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Manoj mentioned 11 attendees. Well, I can do better than that. When I was the chapter chairman here back in 2005, we were lucky if we had 2 attendees on occasion when it come to these. So I think I trumped you in that one, Manoj. Maybe. Okay. The next gentleman I would like to acknowledge on behalf of our chapter, Peter Cunningham. Peter's been an officer for 3 years, chairman, and you know, of all the officers I've worked with in all my IADC, Peter's the biggest. Well, he's just the biggest. That's it. That's it. So his work commitments take some elsewhere, or perhaps, but I just wanted to take a moment and actually we have a personal connection that goes back a lot longer. I first went offshore in August 2000, get this right, August 1984. And one of the first people that I met was Peter Cunningham. For me, it was easy to remember Peter. He doesn't remember me, but I remember Peter for various reasons. And that was the Santa Fe 135. And Peter and I have our careers have kind of spanned the world over the years. We've worked in Asia and Middle East and US and wherever else, UK. And here we are again, still working together. So really, it's a real privilege for me to, on behalf of the chapter, to award you this recognition. Peter, come up, please. Join me, everybody, in thanking Peter. I hope your desk is big enough for this.
That's quite the award. Fantastic.
There we go. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
And sure.
I think really the only thing I want to share with everybody is thank you. Thank you for your trust in allowing me to represent each one of you individually as a chairman of the SAPC. It's been a wonderful experience. I've really enjoyed the role of chairman over the past 3 years. It's been very satisfying to see the growth of the chapter. The activity levels within the work groups increase, and it's been a fantastic opportunity to get to know so many of you in the chapter. So really, all I have to do is say thank you for trusting me to be the chairman for the 3 years. It's been a terrific experience. And please remember, this chapter is your chapter. It's not the officers that run the SAPC that is what this organization is all about. It's you, the members. So thank you very much. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you, Peter. And before I sit down, you've heard me talk about the transformation of the chapter. Long may that transformation continue with new officers, new blood, fresh ideas, your participation. So I look forward to the future together. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Peter for the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, got a lot of announcements and a lot of administrative stuff going on at the meeting so far. Let's get into our first presentation. Our first presentation is on diversity and inclusion and why it matters in the workplace today. This presentation is going to be given by Tracy May. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction. Tracy is the CEO and founder of the business group. She is in as diversity and inclusion expert who offers her services as a keynote speaker, leadership support, and senior executive coach to clients across the industry sectors and geographics. With more than 20 years of experience in supporting leaders in diverse cultural environments, including Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, she brings a wealth of cultural intelligence to her work. Please welcome Tracy May.
All right, can you hear me? I am switched on. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, lovely. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that warm welcome, Peter. I don't like the 20 years plus bit, but we have to live with that. Yeah, I guess today I'm really here to talk to you about diversity and inclusion and why it matters. And I'm getting a real sense in the room that there's so much international mobility in this group, and there's been so much cross-geography experience. So I really appreciate that I probably don't have to tell you that diversity is a reality and that it really matters in the workplace of today. But I've just prepared some information for you, some frameworks and some perspectives to help give you a sense of why it's becoming such a business imperative to focus on diversity and inclusion. And just for the sake of terminology, I will abbreviate that to D&I. I'm assuming you'll know that means diversity and inclusion, but just for the sake of brevity. As Peter said, my name is Tracy May, and I'm CEO of the Diversitas Group, which is a D&I organization. And I actually began the business in 2011, had no intention of moving into D&I, but was working with a range of senior leaders across industry sectors to support them in their people practices. And what I found was there was a tremendous need for leaders to understand difference. A lot of what was happening in the workplace, the conflict, the misunderstanding, the lack of alignment, and so on, was actually due to a low understanding of difference and how difference impacts behavior in the workplace. And so I began to pay attention to helping clients to understand difference. And from that, I began to pay more and more attention to diversity and inclusion and to skilling my clients with the ability to be able to map difference and then work effectively with difference. And so that's a bit of a theme of my work in the region. I'm based in Dubai, but I work across industry sectors and across geographies. And it's also the theme of the slides I've prepared for you. So just summing up, I can look there. That's a little bit about us. But today I just want to talk to you a little about the dimensions and the definition of diversity first, and then the challenges that come with diversity, because I think sometimes when we hear about, you know, what an advantage diversity is, a lot of us come in that with a bit of skepticism because we know the challenges of diversity. We experience them every day. So let's look at those challenges because they're very real. And then we're going to look at what happens when we transition from being just diverse to being inclusive as well, and how that actually stimulates us to move into that place of competitive advantage. We'll look at some success factors as well. So just kicking off with diversity. What is diversity? And it's basically no more than difference. It's the differences that we deal with every day. And sometimes we're aware of those differences and sometimes we're not. Everybody sitting in this room is different to everybody else, but we don't notice those differences until we come into conflict of some sort, or we come into a situation where those differences have an opportunity to express themselves. So difference exists on a micro level. We can talk about cognitive diversity, we can talk about personality, and it also exists on a macro level. We can talk about worldviews and cultures and so on. Diversity is simply a fact. It's not a badge of honor in the workplace of today. You would struggle not to be diverse, okay? So to say that you as an organization are diverse is not really a reflection of any kind of skill on your part. It's a reflection of the workplace demographic. We are diverse. And even if you have everybody sitting at a table who is male, aged between 40 and 50, and from Scotland, just to pick a country, okay, you will still have diversity in that group because you have cognitive diversity, you have diversity of personality, you have different skills. And so the extent to which we recognize and leverage that diversity is really important. But the point I'm trying to make is diversity is a fact. It just is. Here are some dimensions of diversity, and I'm calling this out for you because sometimes I think we don't realize how many dimensions there are. And this is just one particular model that starts at the core with personality, diverse personalities. Everybody in this room has their own personality. And then the next ring, the green circle, is really about internal dimensions of diversity. And these are the ones that we most often pay attention to in the workplace because these are visible. These are the dimensions of diversity that are really difficult for us to change because they're kind of fixed. Our ethnicity, our gender, our age. Not a lot we can do about that. And they're visible. So you can look at me and say, well, she comes from the Southern Hemisphere somewhere, she's female, and she's aged between 20 and 30. Right. Between 50 and 60, but that's okay. So these are visible. We can't really change those, okay? And we work with those in the workplace because they're visible. The next ring is about external dimensions, and those are the diversity dimensions that we actually have more volition or choice over. Who we marry, where we live, who we associate with, educational background, and so on. And we make choices around those diversity dimensions. We all have an affinity bias, which means we trust and prefer what is similar to us. And so based on that affinity bias, we tend to cluster with people who are similar to us, and we hang around in the same groups. So, you know, where you live, who you socialize with, those are those external dimensions. They actually play a very large role in who we hire, who we fire, who we trust, who we promote, and who we ignore. in the workplace because, again, of that affinity bias, which we're not always aware of. And then the outer ring is really those organizational dimensions of diversity. So management status, political affiliation or union affiliation, work location, and so on. So when we meet people, there are a range of areas in which we are different from them. Our brain can't possibly handle that level of complexity. We can't possibly process all of that information. We can only hold 4 to 5 pieces of data in our working memory. So what we do is we usually latch onto those internal dimensions because they're visible, and then we generalize or make assumptions about the rest. And based on that, we make decisions about people. And this just makes us human, okay? We are all processing multiple dimensions of diversity every day. Okay, so as I said, the diversity dimensions that most concern the workplace are those visible dimensions such as gender, ethnicity, age, disability. And chances are, if you've had discussions internally about diversity and inclusion, these are the topics that have come up, okay? Also, any underrepresentation that tends to come up. So, what's driving the interest in diversity, beside the fact that it's just an international reality? You know, the workplace is diverse. There are some external drivers and there are some internal drivers. So let's just look at some of those. From an external perspective, there's increasing pressure from regulators and from investors. Okay, if you think about all the different geographies that you work in some of those geographies, it's regulated. There are specific laws around diversity and what the quotas are that you need to be employing. All right. Also, investors are starting to put the pressure on. This is a growing global trend, and I do, as I say, work across industry sectors. So I do quite a bit of work in the oil and gas sector, quite a lot of work in professional services. These sectors are in very different places in terms of their journey towards diversity and inclusion, but they're both experiencing increasing investor pressure and regulatory pressure. Okay, so it's a global trend. Talent expectations. People who are considering joining an organization now are looking to see what the policy is on diversity and inclusion, what the culture is in terms of diversity and inclusion. We are moving towards a millennially dominated workforce, and millennials care deeply about this stuff, okay? So it's something to think about. Risk management is also a driver. What are the risks? The risk that you don't internally represent the same demographic as your customer base, so you lose track of what your customers actually want. The risk that you're not seen as an employer of choice because your competitors are moving ahead with diversity and inclusion and you're not. The risk that you're not keeping up with industry trends because you're not allowing enough innovation and new thinking into your discussions because you are sticking with what you know. So multiple risks, the risks that you lose market reputation because you're seen as exclusive. Mahatma Gandhi said, no culture can survive if it attempts to be exclusive. And it's tempting to be exclusive sometimes because it is exhausting to be inclusive. It takes a lot of work, okay? So sometimes it just feels easier to take the path of less resistance and just stick with what we know because that's the way we've always done it. But there is a real risk to your organization of doing that. Social and political pressure is a very real factor in driving diversity interest and just the reality of changing workplace demographics. So we've got a number of trends in the workforce. One of the easiest trends to spot is the increased flow of the workforce across different geographies. So we're having much more diversity within the workforce. But we also, especially since 2008, are having people stay in the workplace for longer. And so in some geographies, in the more mature economies, we've got 3-4 generations in the workplace. That is difficult to manage, okay? So unless we are understanding what the different generations in the workplace need and designing our work around those needs and becoming inclusive in how we deal with that diversity, we are going to hit roadblocks. So these are the kind of external drivers. And then in parallel, internally, talent expectations. Employees want to see what your policy is on diversity and inclusion and how you handle the different groups within the organization and who's in and who's out and how do you foster an inclusive culture. I'm not going to mention names, but there's a client I worked with who had an extremely strong reputation for talking up their diversity externally. So we have people from 52 different countries, we can speak X number of languages, fantastic. But the felt experience inside the organization was that it was exclusive, that there were groups of people who were more important than other groups of people. So unless your internal brand matches your communication around diversity and inclusion, you're going to be disappointing your talent expectations. This is an internal driver. Your brand reputation as well internally, your alignment with your own company purposes and values. How much is that a lived experience internally? And your changing internal workplace demographics, including an aging population, an aging workforce. And then, we all understand board expectations or shareholder expectations. So these are some of the drivers for increased diversity in the workplace. I mentioned something about millennials. They are looking for diverse and inclusive organizations. We could ignore that, but we can't ignore that for long, because by 2050, they're going to be 75% of the working population. Okay? Millennials, 47%, this is the Deloitte survey, said they were actively looking for D&I with potential employers, and they also believe that an organization is more innovative with inclusion. So millennials understand the benefits of diversity, and they're looking for organizations to take up the baton for diversity and inclusion and to really live the message that they're actually articulating around diversity and inclusion. If we look at diversity and inclusion across the globe, what's happening across the globe? What are the hotspots for diversity and inclusion in just different geographies? Because they're not the same. And I feel like I don't even have to tell you that, because with your cross-geography experience, you've seen that, different issues in different places. So in Canada, it's about retaining Indigenous employees. So that's really about ethnicity. In the States, mature economy, you've got 4 generations in the workplace. So that's where the diversity really starts to manifest. Also, as in many developed countries, a lack of female representation at senior level. This is a theme globally. Those are the hotspots. Also, high turnover rates for people of color. So there's still a race ethnicity issue in the States, and Black Lives Matter really brought that all back to the fore again. So these are the kind of diversity dynamics that are being wrestled with in that geography. UK, you've got the aging workforce again, and that's true of Europe, by the way. So you've got these multiple generations in the workplace. South Africa, you've still got affirmative action, and you've almost got the flip side of affirmative action now, where it's about preserving jobs for certain people and the impact that has on the economy, and trying to put quotas in place as well as, or uphold the quotas that are in place, as well as create a workplace based on merit, which is very, very difficult. In China, it's about attracting women into the workplace, and this is a theme also in the Middle East, as it is in Australia. So these are the kind of issues. If you go to New Zealand, it's quite an evolved economy. I've done quite a lot of work in New Zealand. And there, it's not so much about gender balance. It's really about age, catering for multiple generations in the workplace, and flexibility, which is related to that. So those are some of the interesting diversity challenges that are actually playing out globally. How well are organizations doing with diversity and inclusion? Because we're talking about it a lot, but are we actually getting anywhere? This is based on a global leadership forecast with quite a big sample group, and the numbers are not that encouraging, okay? And I share this with you because sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming, and you think, well, everybody's galloping down the road and we're so far behind. Not really. There's a lot of talk, but the actual impact of action and culture shift and implementation is still very emergent. So in the survey, it showed that only 22% of leaders represent diverse backgrounds, and this is more likely to be around ethnicity. Only 27% of those polled said inclusion was a strong part of their culture and values. Only 24% said that their company recruits people from diverse talent pools. 22% of leaders challenge self and others to recognize bias. We have a lot of unconscious bias training going on, but the actual impact within organizational culture is still quite low. Very few leaders are actually promoted based purely on merit, and only 22% of respondents said that they actually accelerate leaders from all functions and parts of the organization. So you're still getting in groups and out groups. You're still getting preference for certain groups over others. Very much still a global reality. So what are the organizational challenges then around diversity? There's a low level of understanding, I think, of the D&I issues and how to put a D&I strategy into place. So I often get a call from a client who'll say, can you come in and do unconscious bias training? And when I actually dig a little bit and say, well, why do you want to do this training? What's the outcome you're trying to create? How does this fit into your broader strategy? There's never, well, not never, very rarely a broader strategy in place. It's just, let's bring someone in, let's throw some training at them and let's hope for the best, okay, which is not a strategic approach. It's really about understanding how D&I fits in with your organizational strategy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So generally, there's a low level of understanding. Also a failure to benchmark. We know we're trying to get over there, but we have no idea what our starting point is. We have no idea what the sentiment is in our organization around diversity and inclusion. What are the diversity and inclusion challenges? What is it that we're missing? We just don't benchmark, so we don't know. And so it's critical, if you want to be strategic about it, to benchmark. Another challenge is the lack of senior level sponsorship. We'll give it to HR. We'll give it to somebody who already has a full-time job in HR and hope that they can squeeze it in on the side. And then we don't really want to resource it. We'll just hope that something will emerge from that, so we can say we've done something around diversity and inclusion. And when that happens and there's a clear lack of senior level sponsorship, you're not going to get much traction on your D&I. There are real challenges as well sourcing diverse candidates. Diverse candidates don't come in through regular recruitment channels. That's what the research shows. The best way to source diverse candidates is through referrals, personal referrals, and that is challenging. It's not a procedural thing, it's a relational thing. Another factor is the lack of clear business case. People are not going to go with you on a D&I journey because it's the right thing to do. They're just not. Because by definition, if we're diverse, we have different values. Different things matter to us. To get everybody to align around a value related to D&I is well nigh impossible. The only way you're going to coalesce people around a D&I strategy is to create a clear business case. It has to be solving a problem that people have. There has to be something in it for them. Otherwise, they're not going to buy into it. And many organizations miss that, I think. Another piece is just the absence of clear governance. If there's no consequence for not doing it, and it's hard to do, why would I do it? So unless it really is entrenched in an organizational process and reward system, it's not really going to stick. And then the other reason why many times D&I doesn't work is the blanket approach. I think many organizations don't realize it's a change initiative. And like any change initiative, you have to really break it down into steps, and you have to be really clear about what good looks like each step of the way. And to take a sort of holistic, let's just go on the journey and see what happens. Often, you erode your own goals, you get scope creep, and you lose momentum. So those are some of the reasons. And then lack of training. I'd like to do it, but I don't know how. Those are the kinds of reasons why D&I don't work, and the lack of resourcing. We want to do it, but we don't actually want to throw any money or people at it. And then, it doesn't work. And unconscious bias. By definition, it's unconscious. So we don't know it's there. And so that gets in the way. Another reason why D&I efforts fail, and this is based on some research we did in 2016, is that people are culturally exhausted by the amount of diversity they have to deal with. So we did some research on cultural fatigue, and we defined it as that physical and emotional exhaustion that takes place when you are continuously having to engage with diversity. And we noticed this in organizations. We'd go in and they'd say, we've got 52 nationalities working for us. And then we'd go into the lunchroom and we'd see clusters of people sitting together. And I'm sure you've experienced this too. And this is not a judgment on that. But it's an interesting behavioral observation. We have diversity, but we cluster in homogeneous groups. And part of the reason for that, we hypothesized, is because people need to come away from the challenge of diversity sometimes and just hang out with their own tribe just so they can normalize, because it helps us. We use two different parts of our brain. When we are dealing with diversity, we're using our prefrontal cortex, which is very energy intensive. It's only 5% of the brain, but it uses 80% of the brain's energy. It's tiring. When we go into default mode, what's familiar to us, we're using our limbic brain, very low energy usage, very simple to do. And so we have to balance our brain activity every day. We can't be in thinking mode all the time. And so we default to what's familiar to us. And we tested our hypothesis, and we found that 60% of the people that we interviewed said that they do suffer from cultural fatigue. Okay? And what was interesting to us about that was when we asked them, what do you do when you feel culturally fatigued? 27% said, I spend time with my own tribe or my own cultural group, and 15% said, I withdraw from interacting with other cultures. So this is a real factor in organizations. It's one of the challenges that comes with diversity. How do we create a sense of balance between, taking new ground, stretching yourself into becoming more inclusive and more connected with your diversity, and at the same time balancing your energy, because it is very energy intensive. Another challenge is workplace bullying. I mention it because it's alarmingly prevalent, and at least part of that, what we would call bullying, is many times cultural misunderstanding. If I can't make sense of your behavior, I'm likely to label your behavior as wrong. And so when you have a power dynamic at play and I can't make sense of your behavior, it's very easy for me to label it as bullying or insensitive because I don't understand it. So the impact or the incidence of workplace bullying is escalating globally. And these are just some American statistics. Some of the impacts of this in the workplace: discrimination, marginalization, generation gaps, in-groups, out-groups, miscommunication. And so, as the level of diversity goes up in the world, so the incidence of workplace bullying, misunderstanding, discrimination, etc., is also rising. Here's some stats as well, some global stats regarding discrimination. So you can see that even at best in Canada, 62% of respondents said that it's not tolerated in their organization. But it still leaves a very large margin of discrimination that is happening all over the world. And you can see that the more developed economies, who are a bit further down on the diversity and inclusion journey, are a little bit more managing discrimination a little bit better, but the emergent economies not so much. So what are the kinds of biases that are coming up? This is just based on a kind of a summary produced by the Neuroleadership Institute. We have similarity bias. We prefer things that are similar to us. We favor things that are similar to us. Expedience bias, we trust, we go with the easy route. We believe what's easy to believe when we make our decisions. Experience bias, we over-rely on our past experience. Distance bias, we trust what's closer to us geographically or in time. And safety bias, we would rather avoid a negative than pursue a positive. And that's just the way our brains are wired. It's more important for us to avoid a negative consequence than it is to pursue a positive outcome. And so if I frame something to you in the negative, you're more likely to go for it than if I frame it in the positive. So these are some of the biases that play out every day that we don't know are playing out. And they result in these kind of organizational impacts. So low innovation, disengagement, you can see what they are there. And these are things we all experience. We don't necessarily track back to bias. It's a bit depressing, really. Diversity is a challenge. Just believing that because we're diverse, we're going to have a competitive advantage, I think is a complete misnomer. We've all experienced the challenges of diversity, and the numbers we just look at bear that out. So we need inclusion with diversity, and this is the area of skill. As I said, diversity is just a fact, it's not a skill, but inclusion is a skill. And it's defined here as a work environment in which all employees are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organizational success. Easy to say, very difficult to achieve. Nevertheless, a worthwhile cause. So how do they work together? In this little matrix, it's quite a useful way of understanding how diversity and inclusion work together to create competitive advantage. If you have low diversity and low inclusion, you have an average kind of level of performance when you look at competitive advantage, collaboration, etc., etc. If you have high inclusion and low diversity, you're going to get some positives. Again, because even if everybody is male, Scottish, and between the ages of 40 and 50, you still have diversity of thinking. But you'll have a strong sense of inclusion, and you do start to get some competitive advantage from that. Conversely, if you have high diversity and low inclusion, you're going to have problems. Okay, and we've all experienced that. I think we've all spent time in the top left-hand quadrant there. So really, to bring the two together, you want to have high diversity and high inclusion, because that's when you start to get the competitive advantage. And that's where a lot of the research has been taking place. Here's some of the some stats just around collaboration and commitment, and you can see where diversity and inclusion are higher, you're getting more positive numbers on collaboration and commitment. And this is based on the Center for CLC Human Resources study. Also with productivity and retention, same story. You're going to get much more productivity and retention if your diversity and inclusion work together. Data also shows, and this is from BCG, that diverse and inclusive organizations perform better on a range of different levels. They're 21% more competitive and profitable, 27% likely to outperform peers, and produce higher revenues. When you have a gender balance in your workforce, there's tons of studies on this now, there are also significant advantages. So where you have strong female workforce participation, you have a significant contribution to GDP. Potential gain from equalizing labor force participation by 2030 would be to increase GDP by 10% in the UK. $17 trillion is the impact of closing the participation and wage gap between men and women, according to the United Nations. 10.5 million jobs will be created by improving gender equality in the EU by 2050. And the current value of narrowing the gender gap by 25% is estimated to be $28 trillion. So significant impact. So we're going beyond now organizational impacts, we're looking at regional impacts, because of course the two are really connected. It's also interesting to notice that immigration, which also provides a lot of headaches for for countries rather, also creates a lot of advantage when it comes to innovation. So there's a direct positive correlation between high-skilled immigration and the economic performance of cities and regions. And we've certainly seen this in New Zealand, a country that has quite high, stringent requirements for immigration and has a brain drain as a small nation. So as New Zealanders are moving abroad, highly skilled immigrants are being brought in to replace their jobs, and it's having a significantly positive impact on the economy. These are some of the broader systemic trends. I'm going to just give you some key success factors, and then I'm going to hand over for questions. Am I okay for time?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I hope that's left you with some food for thought and perhaps some urgency as to perhaps paying more attention to this particular topic. But if you were to pay attention to the topic, where would you start? What are the important things to bear in mind? First thing is, D&I must be seen as a strategic business pillar. It is not a corporate social responsibility, and it's not an attachment to HR. Now, I'm not saying that HR shouldn't be involved, but it is a business issue, not a soft issue. And unless we see it as a business issue and we articulate a strong business case for it, we will not get traction with our D&I. So we need to see it as a business pillar. We need to connect the dots between the problems that we have as a business and how D&I and being serious about D&I is going to solve those problems. Because unless we can do that, we can't initiate a transformative change piece around D&I. We then need to break it down into a specific business case with specific targets, accountabilities, and governance mechanisms. Like anything else, if you don't measure it, it won't change. If you don't focus on it, if you don't articulate it, nothing will shift. What you focus on, what you measure, is what will change. And right down to your performance measurement and your reward processes. So it has to get granular. We have to break it down to a behavioral level within the organization. So if we want to attack unconscious bias, we have to articulate the behaviors that we want to see and include them in our KPIs, describe them, reward them, and work with those behaviors in a tangible way. We need to educate our workforce, okay, around why this matters. You're never going to get everyone to align just because you educate them, but it is something that you need to bring into the organizational conversation. It needs to come into the framework of thinking of an organization. It needs to be something that it's okay to talk about. If nobody in the organization is okay to talk about bias, bias won't be spoken about, and you'll not be able to shift the dial on bias. So it's important that we normalize these topics and bring them into the organizational culture and conversation. We also need to then become serious about identifying and addressing bias where it occurs. And as I said right in the beginning, it needs to be led from the top. It needs to be something that is endorsed from the very top, because if it isn't, it will not be taken seriously and perceived as a strategic business pillar. And then with all of that as a starting point, it's very important that you communicate your intentions internally and externally so that it becomes an ongoing conversation within the organization, and there's some transparency and visibility about what is happening. The reason for that is if you see it as something, a problem-solving strategy, and it's remedial and it stays sort of under covers, it's going to have completely the wrong energy. Nobody wants to be associated with that. So it needs to be communicated in a visionary kind of way that actually invites people into going from good to great, going from good to best. Something that actually captures the organizational imagination and allows an organization to see it as a strategic change imperative rather than a problem-solving exercise. So those are just some of the thoughts that I wanted to share with you around why diversity and inclusion matters. And I'm happy to take one or two questions if you have. You might be feeling a bit overwhelmed at the information, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I'll give you a question.
Okay.
There was a study done a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago in the UK, from Oil and Gas UK, around workforce demographics. I think D&I was possibly a kind of subliminal message of that. But I think the question is then, has there been anything since that you know of within the oil and gas industry? You talk about in terms of how businesses can improve by using D&I, but is that data available? You know, the study in the UK was using Vantage and the data was already there. It's a much more mature market.
Yeah.
But is there something within the oil and gas sector internationally that provides us with this level of data?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And the oil and gas sector, there's kind of two divisions. The operating companies are quite evolved in their D&I journey, and there is data available there. The services companies, not so much, because I think it's been perceived. I mean, there's a number of reasons because of the geographies that they work in and the kind of local population dynamics and so on. It's been, everybody in the oil and gas industry and the services side knows that, you know, gender equality is not there. We're kind of behind the ball when it comes to D&I. And for that reason, there's a hesitancy to even embark on it. And for that reason, there's a lack of data around that. There's a lack of transparency around that. So it kind of gets, it's seen as a problem that needs to be solved rather, again, than that visionary view of the future. So yeah, there isn't a lot of data. There's nothing that I've come across in the services sector with regard to oil and gas. But I can say that I'm working in the oil and gas sector, and there is movement, just not documented. It's still at a very foundational level. It's almost focusing exclusively on skill building. Although Petrofac had just appointed a D&I head. Progress doesn't happen very often.
Thanks, Tracy. Maybe a question for myself over here, sorry.
Who am I looking at? Oh.
Sorry, Tracy. So you talked about KPIs to measure, and I can envision KPIs for diversity and formulate a few of them, but I struggle with KPIs for inclusion.
Okay.
Maybe if you could give us some examples.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so KPIs for diversity are easy if you're dealing with that visible diversity. But yeah, for inclusion, it would really be breaking down what inclusive behavior looks like in a particular organization. And what would you see people do, and what would you hear people say if they were being inclusive? So it's about becoming really granular about that. And for each organization, what that looks like will be different, because inclusive behaviors have to be defined inclusively. They can't be imposed. We can't sort of say to people, this is what inclusion looks like. And even within an organization, across different functional areas, inclusion will look different. So if you're dealing with a recruitment team, there are very specific ways in which inclusion can be fostered around how interviews are done, sanitizing CVs, having committees rather than individual interviewers rather. So, if you're in that area, there's a specific set of behaviors that would foster inclusion or demonstrate inclusion. If you were in an ExCom, there'd be another set of behaviors. It might be the way you conduct your meetings. It might be allowing people space and time to bring their different inputs into a meeting in a way that actually works with their personality preferences. So it has to be defined on a granular level functionally, although you could have broad principles for an organization. And it's that piece of work that I think a lot of organizations get stuck on, because if you could just hand me a list of competencies, I'll work with that. And, you can use them as a guideline, but you're really going to have to make it granular and valid and reliable and specific to your environment and what it is, the problem you're trying to solve. That sounds like it. No more questions. All right. Oh, there.
Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed the material. I'm from Russia, and Russians tend to be, as I see from my international experience, very exclusive, or they appear to be very exclusive. Companies run by Russians are very sort of in themselves. But when it comes down to the real reason for it, like a real reason for it, and again, I'm from the culture, so I do know, it's a language barrier and a lot of shame related to individual shame related to not being able to understand another party fully and then bring themselves forward. And because of that, the culture tends to be, very exclusive. Is language training or and in this work language of the world is English, is language training is part of sort of bringing certain organizations to the level of D&I where they can really see those advantages or benefits of having D&I? Is that something that is in it? Or?
It's a great question, actually. So that's a really good example of how, if you're wanting to create inclusion in a particular environment, you really have to look at what's driving exclusion. And if language is an issue, then language needs to be addressed. So it's not something that I've commonly heard done, but in your environment, in your context that you're describing, that would be entirely appropriate. Sometimes it's about giving people the basic tools to communicate. Sometimes it's about building people's self-awareness, because the self-awareness is low. So they have an intention to be inclusive, but the impact that they're creating is not inclusive. And so it's a self-awareness gap. So, there is a skill building element to it, and understanding what is blocking inclusion will help you to understand what you need to throw your skill training at. It's a really interesting fact. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. All right. I'm going to leave you with your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Need help getting that off? Okay.
me. Thank you.
Tracy, I think this can shell out. You're welcome. Very interesting presentation, Tracy. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know, it's interesting in our business, in the international oil business, you know, diversity and inclusion has always been something that we've dealt with for many, many years, you know, 4 decades of working overseas myself, and I think we've come so far, but we still have so far to go. And I think one of the things that makes it especially challenging for us is you talk about you have to focus on success, not avoiding failure. It's particularly difficult for us because to us, success is so much about risk management. So in many terms, when we define success, it's not necessarily doing things particularly well, it's just not hurting anybody or having incidents, and communication plays such an important role in that. So that continues to be a challenge. Okay, I think it's coffee break time, and then we've got a couple presentations afterwards. Coffee and tea and water and things are available outside. Let's knock off now. It's just a little bit after 3. Let's be back here at 3:30 for the presentation from Craig Group, and we thank you for sponsoring the tea break. Remember, you're responsible. We're all responsible. Let's be careful. Thank you. Mike?
Stay alive. Really easy. Forward, back. The only thing you can possibly do wrong is if you push that button, screen goes black. Oh fuck! Push it again, it comes back on.
Oh, perfect. Easy.
Right.
Nice one, mate. Cheers.
There you go. Your business card.
Yeah. Well, actually, I hope someone can actually tell me what sparrows do now. Yeah, but entire table's free, by the way.
One, two, 1, 2.
Yeah. Yes,
Welcome back, everybody, and let's go get started with the afternoon portion. Okay, our next presentation is being given by Craig International, the sponsor of the meeting. And this is not Cheryl Fernandez.
No.
This is Steve Gibson, who's going to give us a discussion on outsource your low value, high volume MRO procurement. Steve?
Thank you, Peter. Again.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Hello again, everybody. So I get the after the coffee break slot. Good to be on the stage again. Gary, where's Gary? Gary, thank you very much for allowing us to come and present today and be the sponsors, and thanks to the chapter leadership for letting us present. As you say, Cheryl was meant to be presenting today. Last minute call off, so the boss gets the call and here I am. So I hope, first thing to say, I hope everybody got a face mask on their table. This is your official Craig International face mask. You may take it home and you may wear it with pride. And also, if you want to buy some with your logo on it, we can supply that. So there you go. Just let us know. Just let us know. So it's funny, I was saying to my wife on that, you know, you come to these events and we're giving out, if this was this time last year, we'd be giving out pens and calendars, and now we're giving out face masks. It's like, what's happened to the world? But we are where we are. So yes, as I say, apologies for Cheryl who couldn't make it. So my name's Steve Gibson. I'm the regional manager with Craig International. Been in the region for 7 years now. Before that, I was in Aberdeen. You can maybe tell by my accent. Spent a lot of time in the North Sea, and also spent a bit of time in Houston, Texas, which is very enjoyable. And a few years ago, I was asked by this gentleman here to come to this region and build our business, the Craig International business in the Middle East. So the slides today, really it's just an introduction to us, because we're allowed to do that, because we paid. So we're just giving you a quick sales on who we are. And then we're going to look at outsourced procurement, which is fundamentally what we do as a company. But first of all, introduction. This is Douglas Craig, my boss. Douglas has been in industry for way over 50 years now. In fact, some of you from Aberdeen may maybe know Douglas. The Craig Group was established in the 1930s. With roots in the fishing industry, like so many businesses back then. Business was then diversified into standby vessels and so on. And so here we are, all these years later with the business still going. So the Craig Group will be 100, I guess, just in maybe 10 years. So we're hoping we reach that milestone, which is quite impressive for a privately owned organization. So yeah, around about 1990, Craig International was born, which is part of the Craig Group. And Craig International focuses on purchasing for some of the big names in industry. So that's just a quick introduction for you. Our footprint today. So our headquarters are in Aberdeen, where most likely my managing directors may well be watching this right now, so I better be good. So our HQ is in Aberdeen. We have offices in Houston, Calgary, Hamburg, and Cape Town. In Cape Town, we tend to deal with a lot of the rigs coming around the Cape. Some of you may be familiar with Steve and Craig and the team down in South Africa. If not, give them a call. They're a good team. They'll help you in that region for just about anything you need. And then in this region, I look after Doha, Dubai, and Oman. So we're gonna focus on the Middle East region for the sake of today. I think everyone puts a slide like this up when they're doing a sales presentation, but these are some of the companies that we are contracted with. You don't get to work for people like Shell, QP, Qatar Gas, unless you have got a lot of ethics and a lot of compliance around how you source, how you buy, your practices and your business. And so we're very proud of some of these names and proud that we're able to serve many of them. Next slide goes into a little bit more detail. You may not see this on the screen. I apologize, it will be in your pack, but just some key stats for the region. We've got 15 sort of key contracts that we look after in the region. Like I said, executed from Dubai, Oman, and Qatar. We have around about 45 people now, which just going back a few years actually is quite a jump visually, right, from where we were just a few years ago. And we have a significant turnover in the region, which, touch wood, we hope to grow in this tough market. But actually what we offer actually works quite well in a framework where you're trying to save money, where you're restricted on people, and you maybe don't have enough resource. We're a perfect company to come and speak to, frankly. So we have noticed in this kind of period, we've sort of grown some of our business shares and our contract share. Our flagship contract is Qatar Shell. So we won that contract back in 2015. It was a 5-year contract, and it was re-awarded in July of this year for a further 3 years. And that contract sees us more or less buy as if we were Shell. So we have a team of 6 people who are, 7 people actually, who are effectively allocated to Shell. They work within the GTL plant in Qatar. And we're taking everything from the material requisition from the MRP all the way through to purchasing, negotiating the price, buying the product, and then shipping the product to Shell. So that's a huge contract. And that, in fact, it was the reason Craig International moved to the Middle East in the first place, was the award of that contract. And then the subsequent years that followed, we went on to secure a similar contract with Qatar Gas, where we have 4 people in-house with Qatar Gas. In 2019, we won a 3-year contract with Qatar Petroleum, where we have 10 people. Again, they actually work from the QP offices in Qatar. And then we picked up some other bits and pieces, Total, Capco, and so on. In Dubai, we look after Shell Philippines, Shell Markets, and also a company that I quite enjoy working with is Telford Offshore, where we have a couple of buyers working in their building in the free zone. And they're a pipe lay installation contractor. So it's very diverse. You know, we don't just do refineries. We're working for a company who has a fleet of ships and needed help from us to source product for those ships wherever they were operating. So it's a really good relationship, really well integrated, and we add a lot of value to them. We opened in Oman last year. That was quite challenging, but fortunately we were able to pick up a contract there quite early, and we're in negotiations for a few more. So we see Oman as a good growth area for our kind of business. Okay, so outsourcing your tail end. I must ask Cheryl why she put a fish here. These are not my slides, these are Cheryl's slides. She was meant to be. I can only assume that the tail end, but I think it probably means more. When you think of tail end spend, it really is the low value stuff that keeps the fish swimming, but no one really cares too much about it until the tail comes off, you can't swim anymore. And so that's really what we're talking about today is managing your tail end spend. So tail end spend, we would consider that to be high volume, so something you buy a lot of, and something that doesn't cost that much, right? So it's draining a lot of your resources to manage that kind of spend. Or, in other words, MRO. I guess people have heard of the term MRO, maintenance, repair, operational spares. Is kind of what we get involved in purchasing. And what you tend to find with this kind of procurement, you've got very low value, which for a big company can be quite cumbersome. You know, I am Shell or I am someone else, and I need to buy something, and it's 250 euros, and I've got to buy it in Germany, and I need it in a couple of weeks from now. Very difficult for a big company to engage with a new vendor that quickly, buy the product, ship it, move it, pay it. A lot of these companies will look for an advance payment and so on. So we really fill that gap when it comes to MRO. So yeah, small spares, compressors, PPE, electrical fittings, gaskets. It really is endless, the amount of different commodities and products that we get involved in buying. And so why would you outsource it? You know, why would you not just have a bunch of guys in your office go and buy? Well, you can, and a lot of companies do. Shell don't, Qatar Gas don't, QP don't, because they've recognized that it drains their resource. It leads to, there's a cost, there's a personnel cost. So, you know, the more stuff they need to buy, the more buyers they're going to need, or administrators they're going to need to themselves. So there's a personnel cost associated, or saving to be had when you outsource something. A little bit like outsourcing your IT, you know, or any other business function for that matter. Efficiency gains, cash flow, that's important. Productivity. So this is a big one. It means we're not there to replace the buyer. For all you procurement guys in the room thinking, well, hang on, this is not going to work because we'll get a company like this in, then that's me, you know, out of a job. It's not that way at all, actually. What we're trying to do is take care of a certain level of commodity of spend to allow your buyers to focus on critical items, so engineered items that are on critical path and so on. So it frees up, it makes you more productive if you have a contract with a company like us. Eliminating transaction costs, this is a big one. Raising a purchase order in any business costs money, and we call that a transaction cost. $250 is the kind of industry recognized high point of raising a PO. You can raise anything from 50 to 250, but actually just a simple thing like raising a PO in your business is costing your business money. And so what you want to do, you don't want to raise too many. You want to reduce the number of POs that you are creating in your business to reduce your transactional costs. And the case study that we're going to show you, we illustrate that point quite well. Okay, so so moving on to this one here. Very complicated slide. Again, this is just in the pack for you to look at, but the key thing for me, is it a thing here where I can, no, I don't want to turn it off. Yeah, here. Automation, you know, this is the key here. And this process map was actually put together by a good friend of ours, a consultant that we work with at Shell. And so he put this together, and really what he's talking about here is to have a world-class purchasing team, you should really be looking to get as much automation as you can, or integration with your vendor as you can. So Qatar Shell, we don't have to wait for an RFQ to come, an email to come from a buyer, go buy this. The way the system works in that particular contract, we receive the data directly through Ariba, and it comes straight into our buyer's queue for purchasing. So we've eliminated all the waste, and it's in real time. We can take that requirement, we can go to the market, we can get quotations, we can obtain 2 or 3 quotations, we can provide all that information back to Shell, and it's automated. We fill in the in our system, we hit send, and it's with them in a matter of minutes. So this idea of, excuse me, automation, oh, gone too far. No, went back. This automation piece is really important, and you need to all, I think, should all be thinking about that when you're working with your suppliers. How do we automate the beginning of, especially if it's volume purchasing you're doing? And I'm sure a lot of companies here are doing this. So yeah, again, I'm not going to go into this slide too much. We talk about things like, not having a contract for items, but you can read this slide at your leisure later. Really, I'm going to the wrong one. When we think of Craig, we think of ourselves as simply an aggregator. So we're aggregating a spend, and I think that case in point would be seen here, which is a case study from one of our clients. I'm not sure if you can all see this or not, but this is from the customer. This is an internal kind of case study they did. So this customer came to us with a problem, and in 2019, they established that to raise a PO in their business cost $250 US. Okay, their words, not mine. And I've been around long enough. All these is different for different companies. Many years ago, my old company, we were around about $175 just to raise the PO. And the justification for that is the buyer's time, is the administration time, the approver, right? You've all got a system where loads of guys have to approve the purchase all the way along the chain. And then you've got the accounts that have to pay the bill and deal with all that. So all that stuff is rolled up into a transaction cost in your business, and your CFO and your accounts people will full well know what that is. And so anyway, this company, it was $250, and they were issuing 2,117 purchase orders in the previous period, and that was going out to 750 vendors. So that meant they had to have relationships with 750 vendors, low value, high volume product. They had to register them in their system. They had to have a contract with them. They had to maintain that relationship. That all cost money. So that's what they had. And by the way, they had about 4,000 invoices a year to contend with. So they signed a contract with us, and we put a team to work. And the net effect was in the subsequent year, they raised 529 purchase orders, same volume. This is repeat purchase, 529 purchase orders. So a huge reduction in the number of POs. One vendor, us, and 12 invoices. A monthly invoice. And so what that led to, for them anyway, was in their view a transactional saving of about $400,000 in the year. Just by reducing the number of POs that so you think as a company you're doing the right thing by going out and fighting for price at $500, at $200, having a buyer paid to go and fight for price there. Actually, you're costing yourself money by having that kind of process in place. So they save quite a significant amount of money. They also save money through what we call baseline and gain share. So our contracts are structured in a way that we take in some contracts, we will take your previous purchase price for an item. We will analyze that price, and then that's the target. That's what we call the baseline for our buyer to go to work. No different from how your buyers would be in your own company. You don't want to buy something again for more than you bought it for a couple of years ago. Inflation comes into that somewhere, and we have a calculation that works out inflation. But baseline savings alone saved this customer so even if there was no transactional savings, they would have saved money using Craig International just because we're better at sourcing that particular commodity or product. And that could be because we've got a better economy of scale. We've got a better spend where we're using these smaller vendors far more than they are across our whole customer base. So when you're saving a customer $520,000 a year, just on their sourcing, then that's a pretty significant thing in the market we're in today. So, so again, the words of the client, Craig International provided significant savings, not only in transaction costs, by reducing the purchase orders and a reduction in vendor management. And I think the last one's the key, the freed up internal resource. So I really do think that's an important one. Lots of companies now are under pressure to do the same work with less people, because there's a lot less of us going around now in companies, because you know, a lot of companies are struggling. So whereas maybe you had a team of 10 buyers in a company at one time, you may only have 3 or 4. And you know, I know a lot of supply chain managers, purchasing managers who are struggling with that. You know, the business expects me to process all this stuff, but I've got a smaller team. And so we feel we are the right kind of company to have, you know, come and speak to, because we can take elements of your procurement away. You can outsource that. Now, by the way, it doesn't just outsource. It doesn't mean to say you're going to give the line item to us to go source and that's it. And you know, we're just going to buy it and sell it to you. We are going to go through a lot of due diligence. We're going to look at your previous purchase price. We're going to get quotations, 2 or 3 quotations, depending on the commodity, and we're going to give you, the customer, that authorization decision. All of our contracts, ultimately, the customer clicks the PO approval, but it literally is a buyer now can just click approve instead of having to go through all of the steps. So I think this is quite a good one of our case studies that's worth taking a think about. So I promised quite a short presentation today. I don't want to go on all day. I'd rather meet everybody afterwards and have a chat in the bar, and you know, and get to know some more people. I think there was a video here, but Gary informs me we can't. We're not going to get the video to load. Okay, never mind. So the video that I was going to show you just highlights everything that we just spoke about, but it also touches on, you may see somewhere, our energy surplus. So you can see some of the banners here, and I think actually I did a presentation on surplus, energy surplus before. So at Craig International, we have the ability to help you get rid of surplus product, stuff that you have in a warehouse that you may want to get rid of. We can do that 2 ways. We can simply take it from you, go to our clients and try sell, or we can now auction that for you. So we have auction software, so we can take large parts, machinery, and we can put an auction out there and try and sell that product for you. And I think all of us have got yards full of stuff, but it's got a value. So that was one of the areas that yeah. Okay, fine, no problem. It's funny actually, because I was going to say, when you watch the video, it talks about these are troubling times for the oil and gas industry, and actually that video was put together about 7 years ago. So it just shows you how long we've been in this kind of troubling times for the oil and gas industry. But we're still here, and we're still all smiling. I think I can't really see under the masks. There's maybe not smiles, but I think we are. Okay, so that was a thank you there from Cheryl. But before we go, I thought we could have just a little bit of fun. We'll do a Q&A. I just want to see if everybody was paying attention to my slides. So, and there is a prize, by the way. Where's Cami? Is she around? Ah, there she is. Okay. So, where, and you just got to hand up or shout out the answer. Where are the Craig International headquarters? Yes, sir. Aberdeen. Okay. Well done. A prize to this man. A round of applause for a prize for this man. Okay, second one. I did mention this in the slides. What is the average cost? Okay, what was the transactional cost that company had in the example I gave you, that PO transaction? Yes. Sorry? 250, yes. $250. Gentleman up there with the mask on. Okay, I hope this isn't too corny, by the way. Okay, can anyone tell me the 3 offices we have in the Middle East? Yes, way at the back. Yes, well done. Dubai, Muscat, and Doha. It's a bit corny, this, isn't it? Bit of fun. Okay, a couple more. What does MRO stand for? Yes, maintenance, repair, and operational spares. Wonderful water bottle is winging its way to you. Okay, second last one, I promise. And I think I've done pretty good on time there. Second last one. How much money did our customer save in the first 12 months in our case that we gave you? Tom? I hear him. I think you got it right. Yeah, okay. Tom, I think you said 500. It was approximately yeah. We'll take to the nearest 500,000. But yeah, just a reminder, it was a fair chunk of change, and mainly on transactional savings, but also on actual product saving, products themselves. And final question, most important one, is which company did Gary Castell recently join? Go, pal. Sparrows off. There we go. And congratulations once again, Gary, for that. So yeah, that's my sort of whirlwind presentation today. I didn't want to take up too much time. Just wanted to get across who Craig International is. Hopefully we've done that. Some of the benefits of using a company like ours. You may not have been familiar with what we do, so hopefully communicated that. And I'd be delighted to speak to anyone after this or in the coming days or weeks about how we can maybe come in and look at your business, look at how you're buying. We'd be delighted to do that. So thank you very much, and thanks again.
Thank you, Steve. Interesting presentation. And MRO is always a real administrative nightmare for so many companies. It's good to have somebody like Craig International around to solve those issues. Okay, our final presentation this afternoon is by Dan Asher, the CEO of IRE Oil and Gas. And the topic of discussion is always that contentious subject matter of OEM versus non-OEM and a supplier's viewpoint. Dan, if you want to come up, turn it over to you.
Is the mic working? There we go. Thank you, Peter. Okay, good to see everyone again. Nice to have a physical meeting, get to interact, get to shake hands. Although, even though not really shaking hands, there's this whole kind of thing going on, which is quite interesting. But yeah, today we're talking about the OEM versus non-OEM discussion, which is quite a heated debate. It's been talked about a lot. Some quite heavy views on it, some quite emotional perspectives on this. We had a discussion last year at the IADC in Abu Dhabi, where there was a fantastic panel discussion on this, and we really unpackaged this discussion. And we had a lot of different perspectives in there, but one of the ones that was missed out was the supplier's perspective. So that's why I'm here today to talk about this. And what I'm hoping to do is to have a quick overview of those previous perspectives, just kind of give us an update on those and remind us some of those ideas and perspectives, but then also dive into what the supplier perspective is and pull out some of the case studies that we've had over the years that we've been working with both OEMs and non-OEMs. So yes, A little disclaimer before anyone starts throwing mud at me. We sit in the middle of an OEM and a non-OEM. Our core business is really focusing on drilling contractors. That's why we like to be involved with the IADC. So first and foremost, this is meant to be an impartial perspective from us, you know, where we build our opinions based on facts and perspectives that we find and hear in our conversations with drilling contractors. Also, this is a huge discussion, and I think we're already a bit behind on time, so it's going to be hard to really unpackage a lot of this. And of course, as we know, there's every different type of equipment has different requirements for the OEM versus non-OEM discussion. So I can't really go into detail on this. We're going to keep it fairly generic, fairly broad, looking at mud system, well control, hoisting, rotary, handling. We're going to be picking examples out of each one of these. Just a quick run through on definitions for those who are not aware. OEM, original equipment manufacturer, which is what this discussion is. OES, which I'm not sure how many are familiar with this one. This came up in a discussion with one of the kind of leading offshore drilling contractors working here in the UAE, probably about 5 years ago, and they'd actually set up a division in their supply chain department that was specifically focused on OES. So I was like, what the hell is OES? OES is original equipment supplier, and that was looking at that drilling contractor in particular. They found that there was a lot of inefficiency when there was an OEM buying parts that were manufactured by someone else. So actually, they were not the OEM for that part. They were buying it from someone else. So they called that OES, original equipment supplier. Then aftermarket. Aftermarket is what manufacturers do to copy OEM parts. They're mimicking them. They're sometimes trying to make improvements on them, but essentially they're just copying that part and putting it out into the market as 100% interchangeable or replaceable to the OEM option. CEM, current equipment manufacturer. Often when an OEM goes broke or gets bought out by someone else, their standards, their procedures and designs are then taken by a new company, which we call current. ARF, authorized repair facility, a very important part of the OEM's business because that's what supports the OEM in after sales servicing, repairs and maintenance. And they are licensed by the OEM for that activity. Then COC, COS, these are certificates, certificate of conformity or compliance and certificate of service, endorsed by the OEM to show that this equipment is still valid and the warranties and liabilities are held by the OEM. SOF, which I think is also an important one, is a little bit more of a customized document. Often the end users, the drilling contractors, won't be able to carry out the same OEM recertification that the OEM requires, so then they'll maybe kind of customize some recertification into an SOF, and they'll have buy-in from the OEM to do that. The OEM's actually, you know, allowing that flexibility to happen, but it's kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And then CBM, it's an important one, condition-based monitoring. I think this is going to be very important as we move forward in this OEM versus non-OEM discussion. I think that will actually eventually expire, and we'll be looking at more data being the true information that governs how these recertifications should be done and how these parts should be accepted. So the main problem that we have in this discussion is this balance of risk and cost. When the price of oil is $100 a barrel, it's great. Everyone can just say, yeah, let's go for the OEM. That's no problem at all. You know, people are having fun, buying things, got a new Harley Davidson motorcycle, got the boat, got this. We can afford to do OEM. That's no problem. But as we know, in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, the market has not been strong. We've had very low oil prices, and that's put a lot of pressure on drilling contractors in particular. You know, when the operators eventually cut the drilling rates, cut number of rigs that are working, how can a drilling contractor with 30%, 40% less budget afford the OEM quality? And that's ultimately the balance and the pivot that we're trying to unpackage today. So if we delve a little bit deeper into some of those problems, these are things that we have identified which definitely need some attention. The OEM after sales service and support, this is one of the most common things I hear complaints about from drilling contractors. I was even trying to get some quotes from, friends who are in drilling companies, and unfortunately there wasn't much to quote because most of it included quite a lot of swear words, and there was a lot of angst against that. But generally speaking, the OEM, their core competency is building manufacturing, designing the excellent equipment that we have in the industry today. After sales service and support is one where often drilling contractors find that they have a contention with that. It's not as good as they need, especially in this time of low price oil. Delivery times and OEM spares, obviously that especially comes into play in, especially in the well control arena. Cost and support for OES spares, again, going back to that OES discussion, where realistically the OEM doesn't know that equipment as well as the actual manufacturer who made that equipment. Maybe they're struggling with supply chain to keep enough in stock. Maybe the recertification, they don't know the recertification as well as the actual manufacturer. How reliable is reverse engineering these aftermarket spares? Who's qualifying these aftermarket spares? Are you relying on a supplier to just say, hey, we think it's good? It's not really good enough, and that's where we come into API. Like, is there enough standards? Is API governing that for enough components in this OEM versus non-OEM discussion? I don't think so personally. Culture of distrust. I think culture has been a big issue when, certainly from our perspective, when we've had an alternative maybe to an OEM that has been, we know data has backed our case to say, yes, this is working as good a quality, if not better. Still, we have a huge job to try and break down that culture, that barrier of saying, well, do you know what, I don't really want non-OEM, it's too risky. And this is another thing, in this industry, at this time when price of oil is so low, people don't want to take risks. We were talking earlier, what do we need to get out of this? We need innovation, and people don't take risks and don't think of new ideas because they're too scared of losing their job or anything like that. So that culture has to change. The operator contracts. So that doesn't really allow us to try out the non-OEM options that much, because they'll say, no, it's got to be 100% OEM. There's no negotiation on that. So if we can't get non-OEM tested in the field with significant economies of scale on enough usage out there, there's never really going to be any progress in that area. And then product bulletins as well. OEMs, they are the ones that know best when they release a new piece of equipment. They get data back from the field. They make improvements and changes and modifications to that equipment that a non-OEM will not be privy to. And that presents a risk. So last year, we had all these faces with no masks on, all smiling away there. It was really one of the, my really favorite kind of discussions that we'd had in the IADC. I think it was a really healthy discussion. We had all of the different perspectives in there, the drilling contractors, operators, OEMs, non-OEMs, and service companies as well. So for my benefit right now, I was interested to kind of have a raise of hands just so we know what this split is in the room right now. So if anyone is working for a drilling contractor, can you put your hands in the air, please? Just so we see, okay. Actually, not as many as I thought. Anyone working for operators? Probably not that many in this room. Oh, we got one, two. Any OEMs in the room? Yes. Okay, we've got quite a few OEMs. Good. Right, my exit is going to be that way when you guys come after me at the end of this discussion. Then non-OEMs. How many non-OEMs have we got in the house? Okay, good. So I want you all guys to, this is a discussion. I'm just kind of literally bringing a few points up. I'm sharing some ideas, but I want you guys to kind of have some input at the end. So any questions that are coming up, keep your pens on the pads and make sure you get engaged on this afterwards when we have a Q&A session. So we're going to just quickly overview on some of those perspectives. The operator, they don't want to have any risk. They think that they've got the most risk in this equation already. So they really want to just go they really want to go OEM and save any of that hassle. I think an important point as well is their perspective that the contractor is not able to effectively qualify the non-OEM as a viable option. An OEM, a drilling contractor in that equation, their incentive is to get the job done, save money. So are they going to be impartial to qualify this non-OEM option when their budget's being cut and they're in a bind? The operators tend to think that maybe that should be left to someone else. So the drilling contractor perspective, this is a really interesting one, the total cost of ownership. I've seen this come up in discussion more and more often. I'm actually interested to hear from you drilling contractors how often you are managing and monitoring that total cost of ownership. So once you buy the equipment and it's been in service for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, how much is that going to cost when you're maintaining it to OEM versus non-OEM? And when is that point going to switch between when you go from an OEM recertification to a non-OEM? You know, you can make the comparison like when you buy a car. You buy, you know, let's say you buy we're probably going to be buying Toyotas with this industry and the price of oil at the moment. But if you buy your Toyota and then you keep it with the warranty for 5 years, after those 5 years is expired, is there really a strong enough argument to keep it with that OEM, especially if the non-OEM has proven that they're doing a good job? And then the drilling contractor strongly believes that they are the best ones qualified for managing and understanding the importance of the procedures and knowing how to recertify that equipment. They feel that once they've got significant period of time working with that equipment, you know, whether it be in Arctic conditions or in the desert heat or in jungle, they're going to know how that equipment works better than the OEM. They're going to know exactly when those inspection points are going to have to happen and what spare parts they're going to have to keep, etc. Moving on, the OEM perspective. This is obviously the most sensible option. This is the easiest option. It's the safest option. OEMs, you know, have done a tremendous job in getting the industry to continuously get faster, better quality drilling, better, safer drilling. You know, with the equipment that we've got today, we've been able to advance this industry, and that's largely due to the ability of the OEMs to invest in research and development and continue improving this equipment that we've got in the field. So there's no doubt about it. OEMs are a major role in this, and it's key that we still have that linkage with the OEM when we're buying this equipment. The risk obviously is probably the strongest factor there with these OEMs as well, is that they will provide that risk and that warranty. You know, in the case of the Macondo disaster, we saw the well control equipment manufacturer was able to, you know, pay a lot of money into that case, which if there was a non-OEM involved in that, that wouldn't have happened. So there is a still very strong, very valid argument for that. The perspective from the OEM, and this was one that came up in the last year's discussion, was that it's not the OEM's duty to be a QMS auditor or support any non-OEM activity, which does make sense. Why would you support a competitor, essentially, that's going to be affecting your business? But I think that one has some potential for debate. The non-OEM, they believe the equipment owner is better qualified to manage repairs, same like the drilling contractor. Non-OEMs are capable, they're competent, they also build rigs and design equipment. So they have the skill sets to do what an OEM is doing. And you even have OEMs who are doing non-OEM activity as well. API Q2 does not really endorse the OEM as strongly. It allows people to kind of carry out these repairs and recertification in their own companies, in-house, and it gives them more tools and guidance on how to do that. And when we look at the core competencies of each one of these, you know, the OEM's core competency is building and designing equipment, and obviously they have this after-sales business that they have to operate. The non-OEM, their core competency is purely focused on after-sales. That's what they're doing. That's what their role is in this industry. So they are efficient at that. They're very effective at that. So the cheaper service, the better quality customer service, the faster response times, this is what we hear regularly from drilling contractors today. So what's our role in this? Who are we? What do we do? IRE is essentially a central piece of this puzzle where we help manufacturers, other OEMs, get their equipment over to the right customers in the right markets at the right prices. Our role in this equation is we make a drilling contractor's purchase as efficient as possible. That's our core competency. We know how to optimize that process to make sure that we are giving them the best value for money. That's what we do. So whenever we see a little bit of fat in the industry that needs to be trimmed, that's what we zoom in on. And this is why I think the supplier's perspective is important in this. And we also work with OEMs and non-OEMs. We're in the middle here. We do recertification to an OEM standard. We're an authorized repair facility for several OEMs, and we also do non-OEM. So we've kind of got a unique viewpoint on that. So here's some of the perspective we've plucked out. The non-OEM discussion needs to be broken down. I think we need a little bit more detail, maybe a framework for how we actually categorize this. I think one thing that I mentioned before, the OES, I think this really needs a little bit more attention to say, is an OES piece of equipment, if the drilling contractor buys that directly from the OES and skips out the OEM, is that considered non-OEM anymore? And I certainly know that operators think that's non-OEM. And I think that could be broken down a little bit more. Essentially, you're buying the same piece of equipment. And then you've got the other aspect, which is aftermarket, which is a little bit more risky because there's no standards that govern the entire broad perspective on how to design and build an aftermarket piece. That's still not really governed, not really regulated, and it's still a high risk unless you can back it with data and things like this. The current standards need to be improved. I think that's obvious. We need to have more regulation on how that's done. Otherwise, the operators have no reason to try out a non-OEM unless there's some impartial. They clearly don't trust the drilling contractor to do that. So we need an impartial organization or association that can govern those issues. It's a fact. Non-OEMs do and have done deliver better quality, better value than an OEM. Not all the time, probably a fraction of the time, but it's perfectly capable of doing that. So in this era of low-cost oil, we've got to have to look at new ways of innovating and making that safe if we're going to have to save money. The collaboration is needed from the OEMs. As I mentioned before, they're working with the drilling contractors to maybe build more cost-effective mechanisms of recertifying equipment, but we can't expect the OEM to do everything. Their core competency is designing and building the equipment. How can we trust them, or how can we expect them to also be this fantastic after-sales support team that has all of the spares on the ground when you need it, all of the people there? That's asking too much of any one single organization or any category of organization, in my opinion. And then, of course, as we discussed earlier, the culture of distrust to non-OEMs does have to be broken down. We've seen it work time and time again. What we're going to do now is look at a few little case studies that's happened with our experience. We had one regarding specification of equipment. So we had an OEM who was buying from an OES, buying from another manufacturer, a component, an IBOP, top drive IBOP, and because their supply chain, that they're focusing on designing and building the equipment, when they're going to buy another component, they look for the simplest, easiest option. So to cover their worldwide sales of these top drive IBOPs, they said, let's just get every one of them ABS and DMV certified, which adds a big price to that product. What we found is that in many regions, you don't need that ABS DMV certification. And it took us as a supplier to look at that equation and be like, there's a bit of fat in there. We need to chop that out. So that's exactly what we did. We worked with the OES, the manufacturer of the IBOP, and said, hey, I think you should sell us some of these non-ABS DMV certified ones so we can supply it to the customers who don't need that. And often we're saving 20, 30%, hundreds of thousands of dollars across various different companies, which is a very simple bit of attention that just needed to be paid on that. Then quality. So typically, everyone expects that the non-OEM is not going to be as good a quality. We found in a situation with iron roughneck spares, we had a shop who was recertifying iron roughnecks for years and years and years. This is their bread and butter. They do this every day. They know exactly what's going on. And when they see a common failure point in this piece of equipment, they are able to then say, well, why don't we design it so it doesn't fail? And they were able to do that, and they've been effectively doing that for many years, and the drilling contractors are very happy with that. They're saving a lot of money, they're being better supported on spare parts, and they're getting better service from that company, because that's what they're focused on. Then cost. So I've picked an example here, an AC drilling motor for an example, but of course when we've got this OES activity, this buying out and reselling, what we've found is typically an OEM doesn't have or has a higher markup than what drilling contractors are often happy paying. So in this case, we had a company that was buying the AC motor to install in their equipment, and then when a drilling contractor was going to them and say, hey, we need our spares, the drilling contractor was getting a price, and there was no way that they could work with that. It wasn't competitive with the marketplace, and if it's not competitive, then what are we doing? So again, same situation, we were able to go in, find the manufacturer of that part, sell them the exact same part, and save them thousands of dollars. So cost is clearly an important factor here. Delivery time. I chose bearings here as well, another OES products. Obviously, we use a lot of bearings. A lot of our OEMs don't make bearings, but they are so focused on the designing and building of the equipment, they're not actually really great at stocking maybe the spare parts. And if you go to the OEM and ask them for a price or a quotation, the delivery time might be in stock, or it might be 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. And in many, many of these situations, we've found that as a supplier, we can actually go and dig a little bit deeper and find that part in stock on the shelf in the same country or city that we're working in. So, and often, you know, something as simple as a bearing, we've seen OEMs remove the bearing part number, remove any mention of the bearing manufacturer, and then put the nice OEM stamp on that. And I think this is maybe a little bit counterproductive, because if you don't sell bearings or if you don't manufacture bearings, maybe there's a way to save money for a drilling contractor by giving them that information, saying, hey, why don't you buy that direct? We don't need that headache anyway. We don't want to keep that in stock. So those are some examples. It's important to give the downsides to the non-OEM argument, so it's not just one-sided. Specification, if that valve I explained earlier, the IBOP, goes on one rig, which is in a non-ABS DMV area, and then that rig moves somewhere else, you've got an issue. That takes management from the drilling contractor to check and verify that. Quality, we know, like I said, the issue of regulation on aftermarket spares is not strong enough as it needs to be. Liability is a no-brainer. The OEMs have much more strength and stability in this marketplace to be able to support these drilling contractors. So when the stakes are high, the OEM definitely still has a very strong argument in that situation. And then contract. You know, I see a lot of drilling contractors having a lot of headaches with their operators when they want to take on a non-OEM piece of equipment. There's that constant battle backwards and forwards. The operator saying, no, we're not accepting it. Drilling contractors saying, yes, it's viable, please have a look. And that's just adding challenges to the relationship. So conclusions, as we talked about, culture is a major issue, breaking down some of those barriers, being a bit more open-minded on the non-OEM option. Operator flexibility, I think being a little bit more, having a little bit more of an open discussion on where non-OEM might be accepted, rather than being very prescriptive in a contract. The role of international standards, and this is one that really for me is probably the biggest one. All of these perspectives that we spoke about earlier, none of them are really impartial. Everyone's got an agenda in this. Unless you have a set of standards which everyone abides by and everyone agree that this is an impartial set of standards. We have this in automotive industry, we have it in the airline industry, we have it in the food and beverage industry. And I really think this API needs to do more, or we need to be looking at alternatives. Collaboration. I think in any market that's having problems, we've got to find ways to work together. This is just how the new working situation is these days. And then the role of AI and data analytics. I'm excited about this aspect because I think you kind of eliminate the OEM versus non-OEM discussion if you back it with data. If you can say that we've ran this non-OEM piece of equipment and we've found, or even an OEM piece of equipment, but we've found that the recertification doesn't just need to be, oh, it has to be every 3 years, or this way it has to be every 1 year. And this, you know, that's really kind of covers one size fits all kind of approach. Maybe if the rig's working in this location, it needs to be every year, but if it's in this location, it needs to be every 6 months. If we can have data that gives us that information, that's really the future. That's where we're getting much smarter about that option. So we did a quick poll, and I'm going to replicate that poll into the audience now. We asked what is the biggest barrier for drilling contractors using non-OEM for after-sales parts and service? Is it A, lack of regulation and standards, B, losing the OEM warranty protection, C, lack of knowledge of OEMs, or D, restriction for operators? So I had the results back from our LinkedIn poll, but I'm interested to see what the audience thinks here. Who thinks that the biggest barrier is lack of standards in the industry, lack of international standards and regulations? Just put your hands up in the air if you think that. Wow, no, okay. What about losing OEM warranty protection? Who thinks that is the biggest barrier for drilling contractors? Okay, we've got a few there, there we go. Lack of knowledge from non-OEMs, is that the major issue? Or restriction from operators? Wow, okay. Well, you guys kind of supported it with the LinkedIn poll was pretty accurate as well. I think we had 40-something% with the option D, the restriction from operators, and then A, B, and C was all equally split, 21%. So I found it quite interesting that this is, it wasn't a strong majority winner like it was in this audience. But I think for me, that's where the impartiality is so important for this discussion. If there's an impartial body that's governing those standards, that's where I think we can avoid some of these fights that we have. So I've left some questions there. Now is the Q&A time. If anyone has any questions, have we got a mic, Gary? You're the mic man? And one there, okay. So yeah, I'd love to hear some perspectives on that and see what people are thinking about it. Everyone's just waiting for beer, clearly. Okay.
Thanks so much for the material. My first exposure to oil and gas was in Shell joint venture in Sakhalin 2 project, and that was run by conservatives. It was a very non-linear, non-conservative project, very tough. But one thing, and I was a member of the tender boards, major and minor. One thing I do remember, project team was, an operations team was kind of rigid about OEMs. So it's an OEM-driven project. Just in a simple terms, I understand we've discussed a lot, but are there really examples that can be brought to, because I review a lot of contracts and I see the restrictions from operators contractually. Other apart from commercial entities, like other examples, other associations, organizations dealing with this non-OEM issue, or so far it's just initiative with agenda of non-OEMs being visible, proving that they are absolutely safe and integral, and basically showing operators that that's the way to go, as well as, and as I understood, maybe I missed something, it's for operator to see that some of the equipment is still OEM and it's critical and they can choose that path. But it's for them also to see that some of the equipment may be non-OEM and it's absolutely fine and it's certifiable and verifiable that that's fine. Just your thoughts on it.
Well, I think there's definitely been a shift towards this non-OEM discussion under the price pressures that we've had. We've seen certain equipment categories open up that door to the non-OEM, whereas let's say, for example, well control has still stayed pretty rigid on that. API has definitely got more standards in there now, which allow non-OEMs and equipment operators, the drilling contractors, to manage and maintain the equipment without needing the OEM 100% of the time. So that shift has happened. There was an interesting graph that I think Deepak did last year for Valaris on that discussion, where he showed the amount of times that OEM is mentioned in all of the API specifications from back to the 70s. And OEM was mentioned a lot back in the day, but that has decreased significantly more. So they're talking less about the OEM and they're trying to allow non-OEMs to get in there. But again, it has to be endorsed by the operator. And I think until they endorse it and they allow it, they're quite prescriptive and still, it's still a bit of a fight with that regard, I think. So. All right.
I'm a microphone man, Dan, but I'm also from a drilling contractor.
Yeah.
And I can be actually excited about this topic.
Yeah.
Like we were last year in December there.
Yeah.
If you guys want to let me share our view.
Please, yeah, I would love
that. Company is 100 years this year, 2020. And about 20 years ago, we decided to have an approach of having uniform rig design. So we have different size of rigs, but the rig equipment, except the mast and substructure, is basically the same. So that helped us to build robust data. So your last 6 item, I think that was the IA, about data and pushing on the life cycle of equipment is already there. So we actually, when we buy an engine from Caterpillar or a top drive, we're not following the OEM timings. We pushing that. What we see here in the Middle East, and especially with national companies, the issues that they're questioning you because they don't have the trust. But we can back it up with data, and we can also back it up with our non-productive time or downtime data. So I think they should not care about having issues if you go with OEM or non-OEM. They should be caring about our non-productive time and the cost of if there is any incidents.
And the way you get that is by having the data, right? I mean, that's an ideal example, Attila. That would be what I would want every drilling contractor to be able to follow those kind of rules and regulations and have that internal standards that says, actually, we know the equipment, how it works better for us, especially in our rig design. Unfortunately, majority of drilling contractors, I think, don't necessarily do that. And that's where the gap happens. And that's where the distrust comes into play as well, because you can't expect everyone to keep those standards always so high. So no, the role of data in that's going to be really important. And like you said, then it kind of washes the argument away a little bit. We've seen this even in well control side of things as well, where an operator wants a drilling rig to start and they say, well, sorry, we got quoted 26 weeks of recertification of our BOP. We can't start there. And then that opens that discussion up with the operator and the drilling contractor and maybe the OEM as well. If the OEM is willing to participate in that discussion, I think it's really healthy. And then also the role of API to say, well, why don't we get an API recertification? Is that good enough? Let's do an analysis on that and let's verify it. And I know there's been certain times, there was one in Pemex recently where they allowed that and they said, actually, okay, let's break away from that OEM tag that we've got. But it was endorsed, so.
And I can back it up. So when tough time like now, everybody wants to have, and the OEM too, but when it's really busy, they don't want to care about, they want to build new and they want to, sell you more. And I know it's not making them happy that me saying that, but that's the reality. So our company, about 5 years ago, was kind of forced into to actually move from OEM to not even non-OEM, where we became our non-OEM. So we are servicing our crowns, our traveling assemblies, drawworks, and anything except the BOPs, because we can do faster.
Yeah.
We have the right people, we hire the right people, and we can actually buy OES or OEM or non-OEM parts, and we just do faster. So the cost of ownership, is actually a lot less.
Yeah. Well, that's also important because you're looking at competency. Then you're saying that you guys are competent to be able to do that at the same level or higher than the OEM. Who is measuring that competency? And this is where, again, I think more international standards that's bought in by everyone could have a role to play in this, because we've seen situations where, let's say, a guy who's worked with an OEM for 20 years and he's continuously tearing down this equipment, fixing it, he knows that equipment better than anyone. Let's say you pick him up and put him in your mechanics team and your maintenance team, and he's meant to be having all this 20 years experience, but again, because of the simplicity of the way we evaluate it, he's not qualified enough. It's a non-OEM inspection. He doesn't know enough about the equipment, or he doesn't have the certificate to prove it. So it does, I think when we talk about that, it's the competency aspect really needs to be brought into play as well.
And the very last comment, I think you missed out one point, and I think we were talking about it, COCs and the documentation and paperwork. I think when we're talking about operator, actually not the operator is the problem here. The companies they hire, the Lloyds, I don't want to name, maybe you guys are here, but
we'll keep names off the table.
All those auditors, I think we really need to bring them
That's true.
to the table and talk to them. They need to be more flexible, I think, and then the operators. And they have a very important role convincing the operators.
No, that's a very valid point. I totally agree with that. One more?
I did have one if you've got time. It's certainly a very interesting subject. What I was thinking was, have you considered the potential conflict between the OEM and the equipment owner in terms of the OEM's revenue life cycle and the equipment owner's equipment cost life cycle? And what I mean by that is at the front end, the equipment owner is driving the OEM to single-digit margin, and they build their economic model on, I will win the work at single-digit margin, and then I will
bank on all of
make up make up some margin on after sales. Whereas, the equipment owner, I think, needs to realise as well that at some stage, if they want to invest in if they want the OEM to invest in R&D and developing newer, better equipment, it needs to be paid for somehow, somewhere. So they can't. I think there's a conflict between how you drive down costs at front end on the capital sale, and then also look to try and drive down costs in after sales as well.
I totally agree.
Maybe that's where some of the OEM versus non-OEM discussion comes in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Again, when we look at the core competency of an OEM, it's to design and build really good quality and efficient equipment. And we want them to continue developing that equipment to make it better as we're moving forward in the industry, so we can be more efficient in drilling and bring those overall costs down. But if we're putting all of the profit margin in the after sales, that doesn't incentivize the R&D as much. That's kind of, we're juggling the wrong way around there. So well, exactly. I think that should be revised then. Again, it's hard to make that point, but that's not a balanced way of handling it, especially if they're, right now, as we know, it's not uncommon for an OEM to quote 20 weeks delivery on a recertification, to not have the spare parts in stock. An OEM is it's impressive that they can get all of this equipment out all over the world, and then drilling contractors expect them to have service at their doorstep with spare parts on their doorstep. I think that's asking a lot of an OEM. And that's where I think, potentially more collaboration, where some of the after sales, the weight is taken off that. But then, like you said, that would mean that the margin has to increase on the front end and the CapEx side. So that's ultimately going to put pressure on the drilling, the setting up new contracts and things like that. So that's a really good point.
Dan, sorry, over here. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Thank you for an excellent presentation. One observation is the age of the asset. I think it would depend on the warranty period, how new, old the asset is. People are more willing to take a risk when the asset is out of warranty, it's getting a bit older. We all buy a car, sometimes it's under warranty. Who takes their car to a different repair shop when it's under warranty? Not a lot of people. It's the risk factor,
Yeah.
So I think any study you do on OEM, on OEM, you should take the age of the asset into possible consideration as well,
100%. And I've spoken to drilling contractors on this specific subject. It even came up in a conversation yesterday about saying, look, maybe we just need to say, well, we'll stick with the OEM for 5 years, and then after that, then it's all hell breaks loose. Anyone can win it, that business. And that's where, again, I think the regulation or the standards could have a role to play in that, to say, okay, you actually build your business model around that then, everyone endorses it, everyone agrees to it, and some people still might decide to stick with the OEM. Again, it's that culture thing, that I can understand that. It's also the risk thing. If you've got a piece of well-controlled equipment, 5 years isn't really that long. You kind of still want to have the OEM recertify that for the lifetime of the equipment, because if you end up in a Macondo situation, that bailout money or that payout is quite nice. So that framework needs to be unpackaged more. We need to look at that, and we need to say, in this piece of equipment, is 5 years acceptable? Is 2 years acceptable? Is 10 years acceptable? And have some discussion around that, and have some standards around that. I totally agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. No more. Excellent. Beer drink time. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, we're running a little bit behind schedule, but just a few more things. What I would like to do is give the opportunity for the new chairman and the new vice chairman just to come up and say a few words. This did appear to be a valid election, and I promise that I will support a peaceful transition of power. Let me introduce you, give you a little bit of background on Wayne. Wayne, if you would come up, please. Wayne graduated with a degree in occupational health and safety from Curtin University in Australia and has since completed a graduate certificate in oil and gas engineering from the University of Western Australia. He has held a number of senior positions in health and safety management across a range of industries since 1995. He joined Vantage Drilling as a QHSE manager for the company's shallow water division in 2014, and in 2015 was asked to take over the company's global QHSE function as director of QHSE. Wayne has lived and worked in Dubai since 2016 and has been involved in the IADC SAPC in various roles, including chairman of the HSE Working Group and a member of the IADC Middle East Conference Committee. Please welcome Wayne Bauer.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. And I suppose first up, thanks very much everybody for giving me the opportunity and putting your trust in me to take the SAPC forward over the next 12 months. I think you'll all agree with me when I say that Peter and his committee over the last 3 years have done wonderful things with the SAPC. From my perspective, having been involved in the IADC worldwide in a lot of regions, the SAPC is definitely one of the leading chapters when it comes to communication and collaboration. So I mean, well done to the current committee and to the outgoing chairman, so Peter. So from my perspective, I suppose it'll just be a bit more of the same, really. Try to step into Peter's shoes. They might be a bit floppy to start with, but I'm sure I'll get the hang of them after a while. So don't plan on changing very much over the course of the next 12 months. We'll try to keep everything very much similar to what Peter's been doing. I have some other ideas that we'll discuss with the committee at our first meeting, which I believe will be in the next month sometime, or maybe after Christmas. I'm not sure. And then we can look forward to presenting some of those ideas to you at the first meeting for 2021. And let's hope 2021 is a little bit easier for us all than 2020 has been. So with that, thanks very much, and I look forward to working with you all over the next 12 months. Thank you.
You're never getting beer, by the way. This is just going to keep delaying things. Doug, you need to come and... Where is Doug? Is Doug there?
Doug is actually on the phone outside.
Is he? He's always on the phone. I'm not going to talk the whole time he's on the phone. Okay, I'll introduce Doug, and if he comes back, he can say a few words, and if not, well, when we get beer earlier. Doug McEwen is, if you don't know, is the Director of Marketing Middle East and Asia at Bore Drilling. Doug graduated with a petroleum geology degree from Aberdeen University, and shortly afterwards, following an early career in IT with a seismic reprocessing company, returned to Heriot-Watt University to study for a master's in petroleum. While studying at Heriot-Watt, Doug started his career with Santa Fe Well Engineering as a trainee drilling engineer. Subsequently, Doug has held a variety of positions across the functions through his 18-year career with the predecessor companies of Transocean and now Bore Drilling. Doug has lived in Dubai since 2014 with only a short spell in the Middle East. Only a short spell in the middle where he went back to the UK before he missed the heat and sunshine of the UAE. Doug is proud to say that he is a second-generation oilfield employee and looks forward to being an ambassador of the industry through the IADC chapter. Please welcome. So anyway, in his absence, welcome to Doug McEwen.
Well, that was a little bit unfortunate, but hey, one of the things I want to say is, Gareth, thank you for all the contributions that you made as a vice chairman this past year, and all the contributions you've been making to the SAPC for how many years now? 20 years. 20 years in Dubai, a member of the SAPC, so thank you. Okay, just a few closing comments. Again, it's good to have a meeting like this in the middle of the pandemic. Please, in the event that you have any symptoms or anybody tests positive in this room, please let us know so that we can at least alert everybody else. The next meeting is scheduled for the 11th of February. Remember, the new memberships for 2021 were rolled out in September of this year. Please, if you're going to participate in the meeting, we'd like to see you enroll in the SAPC and see if we can continue to drive the membership numbers up. Golf tournament is still confirmed for the 24th and 25th of March. As we all know, it's a little bit unpredictable to see what's going to be happening in the future due to travel restrictions and limitations here in Dubai to have large gatherings. You know, the golf tournament itself isn't really something we're too concerned, but you know, last year we had 1,300 people at the gala. May be a little bit tough to be able to manage that. So let's hope things improve between now and March of 2021. Speaker slots and sponsorship opportunities are available for the upcoming meeting in February. Leave your name badge behind. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, if you valet parked, there's a stamp by the entry where you came in here on the table. Just make sure to stamp your valet ticket so that they won't charge you. Again, the drinks and network reception is being sponsored by the Craig Group. Very thankful for that and thankful for your participation in today's meeting and in the SAPC. And we'll call that quits. And one of the things I was asked to mention as we go out or before we go out is that being an American, I'm a little bit naive sometimes on, I think you call it football, I call it soccer. But I understand the Scotland football team has actually won its right into the finals for the first time in like 25 years. So congratulations to Scotland football. And with that, I conclude this meeting. Thank you.